going. Recording in progress. So thought I'd start with a bit of an agenda. So we'll go through a bit of a recap of last week, just talk very briefly about the Trove homework, go through the Trello cards, so a little bit more in depth, a bit of a show and tell of Trello as it is at the moment. Go through some historic photographs, so the collection, or at least the overview of the collection we have here, as well as specific types of photographic material. Looking at digitizing photographic collections. We'll run through a couple of specific catalogue focuses for the week. So that will also be what will be assigned to for you to fill in when you're assigned the Victorian Collection records. And then we'll just look at the theme for this week's Trello image competition. So a bit of a recap just about where I am and where we're the collection that we're working with. So I'm here at the Burke Museum. That's the project that you're with is with the Burke Museum, which was established in 1856 as the Public Library and Athenaeum. So that transitioned into a museum in 1863. And it's one of Australia's oldest museums. We have over 30,000 collection items. So that's a very broad range of materials. So once again, a very, very diverse range of social histories, as well as First Nations artifacts, artworks, and a library collection that's very extensive. We've got contemporary and historic sub-collections within that. And we're part of the Beechworth Historic Precinct. So that's with the courthouse, with our powder magazine, the iconic buildings that I showed you last week, as well as part of the historic townships of Indigo Shire. So that's also supporting the Chiltern Athenaeum, the Stanley Athenaeum, the Rutherglen Historical Society, the Yackandandah Museum. And I really hope I haven't forgotten one there, but I'll yell it out as soon as I remember if I have. The Wiradjuri Landcare Archive. So just looking at Trove, once again, thank you so much for running, for updating Trello with your research. It has been really fascinating to look at what people have picked and the why. And I think it was really interesting to see the images that you chose to attach as well. I wanted to check at this point if anyone was comfortable sharing their research or talking a little bit about what they chose. And it's 100% fine if not, but feel free to put your hand up if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I chose Adelaide Jail because I used to work at Adelaide Jail and I had a real love and passion for it. But I wanted to take the opportunity to find out something that I didn't know about the jail. So yeah, so Adelaide Jail operated as a prison from 1841 to 1988, and it was the place of the hanging of Elizabeth Walcock, and she was the only woman to be hung in South Australia. And the image I picked was a wonderful illustration of the first governor of Adelaide Jail, which was William Baker Ashton. And what I sort of was able to find that I didn't know is that I knew that he lived there in the jail with his family, but I didn't know in the picture is his son, and the painting was created by a beautiful artist, and that image hung in his son's house right up until he died. And so it was just nice to find that picture, you know, is synonymous with the jail, and a lot of people in Adelaide or who work at the jail know that image. But it was just interesting to find that held a special place for William Baker Ashton's son, and it stayed in his house. So
yeah. And it must have been quite personal. I mean, you don't hang anything in your house, but it really does sort of, so many questions come from that.
Yeah, and I just thought it was really neat. You see the photo of the painting, sorry, the drawing, and you've got all these adults there, and I didn't really ever look closely enough to see that there's a little boy standing there right next to his dad. So yeah, no, it's interesting.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, and thank you for sharing. It's absolutely fascinating and a little bit heartbreaking. Yeah. Anyone else like to share at this point? Nope, that's totally fine. I'll thank you so much, Jazz. It's fantastic. And I'll jump back into sharing. Okay, so at this point, I'll also show you Trello. So thank you so much again for giving it a go and getting onto Trello and starting to tick things off and work your way around those lists and cards. I thought I might give you a little bit of a rundown, and we'll talk about the resource section as well. So I will jump into. Sorry, I know I'm not the most slick with my transitions, but I'll get there. Okay. So can everyone see Trello at this point? Yeah. So as you'll now know, as I can see, I know Donna has been in a unique situation. So the rest of you have been able to upload images and put in your research. That's absolutely fantastic. I'll run through these resources first, just to make sure that you're aware of what's there, as well as what your obligations are specific to these. So obviously this is my contact details. This is just to make sure that if you don't have them anywhere else, you can get in touch with me. So anything that has an at and then Molly Culbertson too, I'll get a direct notification to respond. So you can add that, just like say in Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it today. You can tag me in things, and that will be very handy in the activities area in your weekly card. I created this through the week when prompted. So thank you to the person who did that. So I'll be putting recordings in and the slides in. So the slides I'll put as attachments. I'll keep them as PDFs for now. And as the Zoom recordings come, I'll put a link in here. So this will be ever growing through the weeks. So feel free to navigate through. If there's anything a little bit funky about the slides or the recordings, or you'd like to contribute anything, feel free to add to this section here. And once again, if you do the at Molly Culbertson too, that'll prompt me as well to respond quickly. And then we've got a communication station. I thought this would use for anything that doesn't quite sit as a direct communication between myself and you specific to a workshop. But if you'd like to throw anything out there, it doesn't necessarily have to be a question. It can be really anything you've found, anything you find interesting, as well as question answer for the duration of the project. So feel free to throw in here and we can see sort of what it looks like. But at the moment, it's just an overall communication area. And once again, you do the same thing. You can add in here, and you can add, you can do it as text and make things bold or italics if you feel like it, as well as adding images and links and the like if it makes sense to do so. So I've also put the project schedule. So if you click up here, it'll come up nice and big. So this, we'll see how we go. This is the schedule for now. It's what I think will be the best way to run through different aspects of cataloging through the project. When it comes to the collection types and things, this might change as things become more clear through the project. But if it does, this will be updated, and I won't leave you with something that's out of date. But feel free to jump in here just for that basic timetable. And then you can keep scrolling down, and in here, this is going to be absolutely essential. So we'll start running through the two main catalogues this week, which will be the Burke Museum Catalogue Manual, as well as the Victorian Collections Catalogue Manual. But I've added some more documents in here that I thought would be really good reading for you. So they're not compulsory, as in you don't need them to be read by a certain date, but I would highly recommend reading so this is our collection policy. So it very much guides my work in my position when items are coming in or going out of the collection, when they're being offered to the collection. But it's a really good document for framing what we are about when it comes to being a collecting institution. What do we collect? What don't we collect? As well as the valuing that comes with that. It was a really impressive effort from my predecessor, and it will be something that's reviewed every couple of years unless it's prompted to do so sort of sooner. And that would be if something's come up that doesn't quite sit with the direction that the institution is going. But at the moment, it's a very good document and it guides a lot of what I do. So that one I would say have a read at your leisure. The national standards for Australian museums and galleries. Once again, it's a really good framing of this type of work and what underpins the decision making that we use. So then there's also the Small Museums Cataloguing Manual. So this once again will give you a lot of information that will guide decision making, but this is more specific to cataloguing. So it will give you a different perspective again. But just to reiterate, definitely look through the Burke Museum Catalogue Manual and the Victorian Collections Catalogue Manual. The Burke Museum Catalogue Manual, you'll notice that the schedule matches in a lot of ways the areas in this manual, and that's intentional. So we will be going through these more and more. So then I've also put in some resources that will be more meaningful in some weeks than others. So the historic photographs, these are some resources that I thought would be quite useful. They're readings about specific types that we will go through today as well. And it's, I would say it's really interesting as well as a really great resource for cataloguing photographic collections. So then there's also, this will make more sense when we're looking at significance specifically, but they're resources that in that week I would very much encourage you to read. But in the meantime, if you feel like doing some additional reading, I thought I'd keep them here so you can go through them. Exactly the same with the condition reporting and risk reporting. So this will be very useful when we're going through these areas of cataloguing, but feel free to look early if you'd like to. And the same for copyright. So copyright has a lot of quirks, very specific to cultural institutions, and we'll go through them more in the copyright week. And then these are for our geological collection, because it doesn't work in the same way. A lot of our geological collection is from the original catalogue, so we won't be using what you'll get familiar with over the photographs. We won't be using the catalogue worksheets. So I put this in here very early, so ignore it if you need to, but we will come back to it. And then the getting started with Trello, that was actually there when I created the template, and I thought it's a bit useful. It's links to the Trello website and how to use it if you get stuck. So feel free to go through that as well. But I'll jump back in. Where am I going? First, I'll stop sharing here and I'll jump back into my slides. And I'll also just check, are there any questions or anything that people are a little bit unsure about or stuck on when it comes to Trello, or things that would be really useful before the end of this workshop to clarify? No? Okay, excellent. So in that case, we'll keep moving. So we'll look at historic photographic collections. So the Burke Museum has over 3,000 historic photographs in the collection. So there's, and I do apologize, I pronounce everything terribly, but there's daguerreotypes, stereoscopic photographs, postcards, carte di visita or visiting cards, and negatives.
Sorry, Molly, are you meant to be sharing your screen?
I am. Bum, bum, thank you so much. I'll go back one. So it's a pretty boring slide that you missed. So there you go. And this is an example of each of them. So in these ones, I thought I'd just show a bit of a picture for now, and we can run through. Next week will also be on historic photographs, so we can run through in more detail the quirks of each of these, but here's an example of each of them. You will find that you have quite a few of these stereoscopic photographs in your records. and they're quite wonderful. They're the ones that are meant to be together. They're a bit of an optical illusion, so that when they're viewed together, they will give the impression of a 3D image of a location. So those will be the ones that we'll really dig into in quite a big way. And then I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about digitizing photographs. So we're quite lucky. We have an Epson scanner in the building. This is a photo of our little setup at the moment. It's a very good scanner. So it scans to a very high resolution, as well as scanning a lot of different types of photographs or photographic materials. So you can use it for negatives, glass slides, as well as photographic prints of all different kinds. And it means that it's digitizing it into a TIFF format. So a TIFF is the standard for any cultural institution, as well as it's a National Archives standard. So it means that the file is not going to compress over time. So the detail isn't going to reduce and reduce and reduce until you end up with a very small version of that image. So the reason we do this is we have a permanent copy. So we will, and one of my volunteers does this religiously on a Monday. So she's working away at the moment. So she's currently digitizing photographic negatives, where you'll use the Epson scanner as well as associated software, and you create a TIFF. You add the metadata, which is at this point the accession number, so the registration number specific to the museum. So we keep it identical between the physical photograph and the digital version. So all file names will have that identifier or that accession number, followed by whether it's the front or the back. We use obverse and reverse. There's different institutions will use different indicators, but every photo will be taken as the obverse and then also the reverse. So we keep it quite simple and quite logical when it comes to the naming conventions for each image on purpose. Anything that's sort of too smart becomes so smart that no one can use it. So at this point, we're keeping it like that, and then it will be uploaded into Victorian collections. So we also have, as well as having a file format standard, we have a DPI standard, which is 600. That's the generalized standard for images. So that's dots per inch. So it's literally how many dots make up that image, which is, I guess, like with pixels, when things become pixelated, it would be because there isn't a high enough DPI for that. And we can continue looking at, and please ask questions about this because it is an evolving space and the standards change from time to time, as well as changing a little bit between large and small photographs. But the standard is generally 600 DPI. You put that in your software as a setting, making it a TIFF, and then making sure you're front and back. So at this point, I thought we'd have a bit of a look and a bit of a play around in Victorian collections and look at these catalogue focuses. So identification, the media itself, so that's the digitized photographs, the description, the location, the research, the notes, and admin. So admin you won't actually be using, but I thought I'd give you a bit of a show and tell of it anyway, just so that you're familiar. But I'll be going through Victorian collections as well as the catalogue itself. So we'll start with, I'll try and do this without being too silly about it. Sorry about this, I'm not at all slick. So we'll go into here. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, now can everyone see the cataloguing manual? Yeah, fantastic. So I'll give you a bit of a run through. So this is just cataloging. So as you can see, they're color coordinated. It will be mostly in line with that color coordination, but with a little bit of difference as well. So I'll take you through just the beginning. So about the manual. So the manual has been designed as a step-by-step guide to cataloging the photographic collection on Victorian collections. So there's a number of icons used throughout this manual. So here's a little guide. And I'll just read this out for fun. So about the cataloguing, so documenting the collection is vital to the museum's active and responsible role in managing its key asset, no matter what the focus of the collection. The reasons for cataloguing are many and varied, but they roughly fall under enriching the collection's cultural value and enhancing its administration. Cataloguing underpins many important museum activities, including research, exhibition development, conservation, risk management, publication, and outreach work, all of which are dependent on detailed and up-to-date collection information. Documenting an object enriches its intrinsic value. The accumulation of information gives an object meaning and context and results in a strong understanding of its uniqueness, its contribution to the collection, and its reason for being collected in the first place. So I think that's a really good overview of why we're doing it and why we should actually care about it. So to set up, I won't run you through this right now because I'll run it through in Victorian collections a little bit. But what you will have to do, and I will assign access to each of your accounts, is create that member account. So it should work very similarly to Trello, where you create the account and then you can access our collection database. So this is, I've kept this screen grab in here without updating because this is a very good manual, but this is the old collection manager's details there. So she's done an excellent guide, a sort of step-by-step here for how to navigate in. So I'll show you in Victorian collections as well, but items are our records. So you'll always navigate to items to get started. So you have to locate a record. Really, the search bar in Victorian collections is the best way to access any records. And I'll show you about building inquiries. So I'll run through this. I'll run through that in Victorian collections, but let's just start with identification. So this section captures key information required to create a strong and reliable connection between a physical item and its associated information. So I'm sure you're aware of identifiers, registration numbers, accession numbers in collections already, but a couple of things that I do find are very easy to get caught on is when it comes to an identifier or a number or a code, it doesn't actually matter if it's in numerical order. It doesn't matter if it matches anything around it. It's about having a unique identifier that makes it specific only to that one record or that one object in a collection. And it is very easy, and you'll see this in the catalogue worksheets. It's very easy for that information to become separated. So even though it is quite a simple thing, as in a one code for one item, it is something that is always at risk of dissociating or disconnecting between the information and an object itself. So it is it's very good to act with extra care when it comes to identifiers, and even sort of the little things. So if it's with numbers, making sure if there's any spaces between them, any dots, anything like that, that you're replicating it exactly the same. And if it is anything that involves letters, even things like making sure that it is capitalized or lowercase. I know it sounds silly, but it's incredible what you see in collection management over the years. So you run through and make sure you add this information. I will already be adding the identifier that we would like to use, and you'll see why. And it's very much to do with the fact that some of the photographs have multiple identifiers. So we'll be using other identifiers to make sure we're not removing any information, but we are prioritizing one registration number over all of the others. So you'll run through, the item type will be photographs for this week. This should be filled in already, so I apologize for that. But I needed to so that I could very easily find them in preparation. So as well as this, we have the item name. That will be photograph. I think it would be very worthwhile to identify what type of photographic material. So that would be if it is a stereoscopic photograph, actually putting that detail in. But we'll keep running through. So in here, we have the primary identifier. So as I've been saying, it's also a registered number and a session number, an object number. People like using their own terms, and it's usually what they've been taught in university or they're comfortable with, but they're all talking about a unique identifier. So the item type, so this one, as it says, is a drop-down list. So there's no risk of spelling photograph incorrectly. You just select it from the list there. So the item name, once again, do your best to identify what type of photographic material. And the title is something that we only use if it's an official title. So we're not making up new titles. We're not assigning anything new. We only want them to be an official title that was assigned, and the object came with that title into the museum. So for the other identifiers, it'll be a mixed bag. Some of them you'll be putting in multiple numbers, and that's really anything that we're finding on the catalogue worksheets that is not the primary identifier. So I'll show you these sheets as well. So we will jump over this, but then we'll look at the media. So this is the digitized image. So for each of the records that you'll be assigned, the digitized images are already uploaded. So I'll show you this, but it's a drag and drop situation. It's very straightforward, and I'm very thankful for that. But you drag it, you wait until it's uploaded, and then I always save the record at that point and then go in if I want to keep updating. So you drag and drop. I'm also uploading the catalogue worksheets into this place because that's the primary point of catalogue information that you'll be using as a reference point to fill out these records. So at this point, you'll be able to navigate through, click on the image you'd like to see, and that will become the one that you're able to fill information in for. So you click on the one that you would like. So this will be the obverse, so the front of the photograph, and then you can add to these areas here. So the title, that will be the file name. So I'll run through what that looks like in Victorian Collections. So in here, once again, I'll show you what these drop downs are, but for now, it's a drop down list. And then the credit line will be the Burke Museum collection for everything. And if there's any additional text. So the additional text, it should be here. The additional text will be informed by the catalogue worksheets. But here is the media titles. So this is the format. So at this point, you can see obverse front, reverse back, and the catalogue worksheets. And so describe what you see in the image. This is for the alt text. So it's it aids vision impaired viewers with screen readers to understand the image. So this more and more is something that the benefit is seen in cataloging, just to make sure that the information is accessible as possible. And so we'll run through. So the description, the physical description, so something that can sometimes be a little bit conflated, but hopefully is straightforward here, is this is literally what you're seeing. It's not the context. It's not any of the historic information. It is a physical description. It's literally what the picture looks like. And then we'll run through. So here's an example. So black and white rectangular photograph printed on matte photographic paper mounted on board. So very straightforward. And without, I guess, any fluff or any detail that is more inferred than seen. And so with these, so once again, this is just guiding the order. So it's really good to be as consistent as possible, because anything that's the more consistent, the easier it is to search and find detail later on. And the inscriptions here. So the inscription is anything that you see on the reverse, very likely, but anything you see on the photograph itself. So the obverse will be more likely with postcards or items that are more prone to having writing on the front, but it is text or engravings that you can see. And once again, it's everything you can see, and we do a dash to separate information. Different institutions will use different, oh, different separators. So then pretty straightforward, the language, so that's the language that is written on it in the inscriptions. And then there's the production method. So it's a photograph. For the production method, depending on how detailed you would like to be or how much you know about the photographic type will inform this, but they become little searchable pieces of information. So it's best to not overdo it and make it as straightforward as possible for the production type. So the materials as well for the photographs, make sure you definitely know the material type. If you think that there might be a certain material in there, but you're not sure, then I would always err on the side of caution and only add what you know. And then the dimensions. So for the dimensions, they should be on the worksheets. If they're not on the worksheets, then I would leave this blank, as you can't come into the museum and measure it yourself, but I sure can, so I'm more than happy to add those. And so this is what it looks like. So you definitely want to add the unit. It's very disappointing when this isn't added, because it can completely change how you're imagining that physical item. And we're not going through relationship, but the rest of them, so the rest of the fields for this week, there won't be a large amount of detail for you to input. So I might jump at this point to Victorian collections. So I'll show you all of them in there, and we'll get going on a bit of a dummy record, or one that we're going to use to play around with. So you'll be able to use this record to trial and error through the project as well. But for now, I'll use it as an example. So I will, oh, sorry again, I'll stop sharing for now and I'll jump into Victorian collections. Make sure. Sorry about this. Hopefully it will be better in future weeks with the transitions, but I will share here. Okay. Now, can everyone see Victorian collections up on my screen? Yeah, fantastic. So if I go back. So once you've logged in, you'll get to a page like this. And this is where you'll want items. So in my organizations, I switch between them because we have specific collections for research as well as the courthouse. But the one that you'll be added to is the Beechworth Burke Museum collection. So we call that organization, and then we'll go into items. So at this point, it comes up, just starts at the top and with a list. You're able to pick how many records you'd like to see on each page. So I'm fairly sure that when you come in for the first time, it's quite a small number. I always like to do a larger number if I'm searching and a smaller number if I'm being quite specific to a subset in the collection. But to search, you'll be provided with the identifier, and you can just copy it into here. So that would be the most direct way if you do know the ID. You can click enter and it comes up, so just like a search engine anywhere. But the other way that you can go in, which is really useful, is building queries. So this is where you can pick the field that you'd like to search. So searching only in one field. So say if we went into identification, identifier. So you're saying, I'd like to only search identifier and I want it to be exactly this value, and type in the identifier detail you have and then run the search. You can't press enter at that point. It's a bit of a quirk to Victorian collections. Always press run and then you've got it here. So as well as this, you can pick which columns you'd like to see. So this is which fields you'd like to see, as well as I always make it so I can see the image. It's a little bit easier for the reference, and then click into it. So this is the image that I thought anytime you'd like to practice, but you're not wanting to save it to the records you've been assigned that week, I'll make sure this identifier is very easy to find. So we can all have a bit of a play around and trial and error in here. So this is, I do love this photograph and I love this story. So this is Tom Parkinson and Tony Evans. So there were two Beechworth locals. We don't have an exact date for this photograph, but it has to be around 1935 because they are very famous as the Barrow Men. So they had a wager. It was Anzac Day in 1935, and one of them, so it was Parkinson there was a wager that Parkinson couldn't push Evans from Beechworth all the way up Mount Buffalo to the chalet there, which is quite a famous chalet. It was an 82-kilometre wheelbarrow journey. And so the wager was on for, I think, £20 that they couldn't do it. So they practiced and trained for about a couple of weeks. I think it was 3 weeks. And then they went for it. They had to get there in 8 days. And they did it very successfully. They were absolutely freezing, but this is, am I sharing? Yes, this is a photograph of the wheelbarrow they used in roughly the positions that they assumed to make the journey. But it became something that was very much about camaraderie. There was a lot of community spirit, and it was in the newspapers around the world. And in the end, even though they were successful, I don't think the money transition ever even happened. I think that they weren't really interested. I think they went for a beer afterwards, and that was enough for them. So I thought it was quite a nice example. But we have here the obverse. We have here the reverse, so a very boring picture. Some images, some photographs do not have anything on the back. So I thought that was a nice example as well, that you're not always going to get lucky with a huge amount of detail on the back. But this is an example of the catalogue worksheets. So there will be ones for each of your records. And you can see here, I'll zoom in a little bit, that even this is a little bit suspicious with the ID for this record, because there's been suspicious alterations made along the way. But we're going with these as the point of truth because it's the best detail we have. So at the moment, 6512.6 is our identifier. And we run through this information. So quite minimal, but at the same time, better than nothing. So you'll see here, there's measurements, so we can use them when running through the measurements. We've got a production method. We've got material, which is photographs, so better than nothing once again. But we also have for this, and not all of the records will have two, but we have 2 sheets. So on this sheet, you can see there's multiple numbers. So these numbers, I'm still piecing it together, and a lot of it is trying to work out the timeline, who was in what position over time, and what was the logic they were using in cataloguing as to why there's an 84.204.1. I will say these were done in 1984, and someone was adding new identifiers. I would say that they didn't have access to the original identifiers. And then someone's tried again in 1997. So for this one, we're going with the museum code. It matches on both of the sheets, except we're going with 0.6 because it's the closest we have. So these at a certain point, you have to pick a logic, or at least I'm picking a logic and then making sure I'm capturing all of the other information. So nothing's lost, just in case it is information in the future comes up that means that we might need to prioritize one of the other numbers as the primary number. But for now, this is the logic I'm going with, and it's why it's already added to the record so that you don't have to do that. But was that a voice?
Yeah, sorry. If you can flick back to the photograph of the catalogue sheet, sorry, would
Yeah, this
you
one?
would you still add as an extra identifier the museum code where it's got BMM in front of it as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would add everything. So just in case, I think it's always better as long as you have them in the right area. So when going through identification, making sure that you're putting them in other identification so that it's clearly not the same as the primary one, then I think you're going well. But I would always add everything that you find. So I'll run through. I'm
I
just
have
aware.
just one quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, totally
I was
fine.
just wondering, back on the second form that you were looking at just before, yeah, on that one, you've got, so in the museum code, it's 6512.5. Why is that then 6512.6? Why the extra point?
Yeah, very, very good question. So for this one, it's a mixture of it matching here
Oh, right. I forgot that page. Yeah.
and ticking here with the copy. So what I'm
Okay.
reading from this is that this is not the original. This is a copy, which is why it's the 0.6. And the secondary on this means the same thing. It means copy. So that's the logic that I'm going with for this one. And then capturing 0.5 is very likely identical to this, but a different version. So a different copy or the original. But I would say at this point that I would think it's unlikely to be the original, considering it's a point and it's not a 0.1. But at the same time, I'm not yet sure. So that's the logic I'm going with, is that it's matching closest between these two. They're both copies. And we've got the other identifiers if we can piece it together. So because we don't have the whole set of 6, we don't yet know. So it is really making sure that that we give room for investigation in the future. But I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot it was 0.6 on the other page.
Oh, that's totally fine. And in saying that, if someone were to prioritize the 84 series, then it could be a different story. But because it isn't between both of them, that's not the way that I'm going. So I will make sure we run through. So at this point, every single one of these needs a title. So this one would make sure it starts with the ID. And I would be using the catalogue to guide you through the format, but making sure that main details are that the identifier is there, that it's obverse. Those would be the two key details that I would always add, even if there's a little bit of question mark around the other information. So I'll show you here as well. So this is showing you, so this is whether it's to be published or not. So at the moment, I would go do not share for most things. So do not share for every single one of the catalogue worksheets because that's for our internal use. But once we're running through copyright, this will make more sense. But for this one, because it isn't within, I believe it's 70 years of creation, we should be in the clear for public domain. So once we're going through the copyright, this work will make sense. But for now, I would set everything to do not share. We don't want this to be visible until we're 100% happy with the information that we're adding. And the credit line, this is where you would put Burke Museum Collection. Very easy for us because everything that's being assigned is in the collection. So this one for the alt text, this is I would very much be guided by our catalogue. So for how you do it, I will say, oh, sorry, I thought I'd jump in to make sure I'm not going against the catalogue itself. But really, I would keep it very straightforward for the alt text. Oh, I need to jump around. I'm too all over the place. But making sure it's, you know, man holding wheelbarrow. Wow, second man sits, I guess, atop. But once again, I would do better than this, especially that. But looking for visual cues. In here, so digital reproduction. Once again, I'm not sure for this. I would actually say for this one, I might have to get back to you next week on this one for exactly how we're doing it. So I do apologize about that. But for the description, it's a very basic description that will be matched in here. So the description will be the physical description. So I would just be describing it as a photograph, a photographic print, and what you see inside. And then running through, it's probably a good prompt to go to description. So for this one, once again, it's exactly what you see. And this is for the overall photograph. So no need to describe in the physical description. In this description, I will do a basic description for the back. But for the physical description here, I would only do the front because that is what is the, I guess, good stuff. Why we're keeping it is the picture on the front. So the inscriptions, once again, is everything that you see written on the front or back or anywhere on a photographic item. The language will be the language that those inscriptions are written in. And the production method, so this is the drop down. So if you click P, it'll jump to P and you can click photograph and they will just pop up as individual ones. Be very careful. If you click in the wrong place, they can delete. But the material, if you know there's paper involved, I would add paper. If you write it, see how here different versions have been written. I would always go with capitalized first letter, but once again, this can be updated later, but I would go very consistent. So I would never put a full stop at the end and I wouldn't do it in all caps. Some people would disagree, but for yourselves, I would say be consistent as possible with yourself and try and think about how people would search later on. So when searching, it's unlikely to be searched in all caps, which is why I would choose to do it this way. The dimensions, so these dimensions, you will be able to say, so the configuration, if it is mounted or not mounted, in here we have the height, length, and width. So we're getting all of these. Oh, I'll just jump back from the details here. So we only have a height and a width because it's not a 3D object. And in here, if it has centimeters, do the same for the details here. So I would just always pick, if there are details on the catalogue worksheet, what it says there, and add it in over here. And then any other measurements, we don't weigh photographs because they're very light, and this is far more for the 3D objects that are quite large. I will also, from here, sorry, just show you quickly because I am aware that we've got 5 minutes left. These location details, this is more a show and tell. So this is where I would add the physical location. So this is referring to the physical photographic print, not to the digitized copy. Of course, the digitized copy is in here. So for this, I would update any time, so a current location, as well as any time it's moved. So that will very likely be for an exhibition. But sometimes if there's a moving around the building, we'll need to update in here. So we location track solely in here. So for research, I'll show as well. So this would be for specific publications. So not just research in-house, but if there was, say, an article in a journal or a magazine, I would pop it in there. And the notes, so I will say, add notes here if you do not know where to put other information. But that can be really just for our internal communication for now, but it's a catch-all. So the notes aren't searchable, and especially from the public-facing side, they aren't visible. So it is an opportunity to just let someone know if there is a quirk specific to that object. So feel free to add anything in there at the moment. And the admin, this is where I can go in, and this is not something that you'll be using, but just something to see. So admin at the moment, these are my details. It's tracking any changes in Victorian collections. So I'd be able to change the record type. So everything is an object for us in the main collection we'll be working in. So even photographs are considered objects, not a specific subset. And then in here, it's very important, I can change the status to be public or private. So everything will be private, which means not anything seen online until we're ready for that to be the case. So that's the sort of basic rundown. And I do apologize, I will get a little bit more detail on the items that I've skipped a little bit for next week. But hopefully that's a clear enough run through for now. But are there any questions at this point about Victorian collections or about the work that we'll be doing this week? Or is anything unclear from that run through?
I do have a quick question. When you're on the description, if for say there's no inscriptions or markings or like anything of notice, do we just leave it blank, or do we write like not applicable, nothing, anything in particular we have to write there?
Yeah, so just leave it blank. So the same for any field that there isn't something appropriate to put in. We don't put in anything such as no inscription. We just leave blank.
Cool.
And any other questions?
I'm sorry, yeah. How will you issue us objects? Will you give us a list of identifiers through Trello? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that'll be in the week 2 or the workshop 2 Trello card. So I'll add that, and I'll add the list, and you'll be able to tick them off. So it should work very much the same as the last week. But yeah, if there's any lack of clarity there, please let me know. This is all a learning curve for me as well. So let me know if there's anything unclear in that.
And if we have questions about something in particular relating to a particular object in that week 2 card, can we just tag you and say, hey, have I done this right, or whatever?
Yeah. So if you think it's something that would be useful for the group, you go to the communication station if it's specific to the records or your work that week, definitely within that workshop too. And I'm not sure whether we'll be cut off, so I apologize if we will. My timing needs work and should be better each week. But I will just show you our Trello cover image competition, just in case it does cut out. So for this week, please find and upload your best perfectly timed image. Take that how you will. And at the end of the week, I'll hopefully recruit someone from here to, as in from the team at the Burke Museum, to help pick a winner for that. But I thought I'd just quickly let you know what the theme is before we have to run off. But once again, if you're not someone who likes competitions, there's no pressure there either. So feel free either way. But I think that's everything from me this week. So thank you so much for another good workshop. And I'll get to assigning records and getting that new card up in Trello. And absolutely any questions or anything that that you'd like a little bit more clarification on, just reach out and do use Trello where possible to do so. But thank you again, and I'll talk to you through the week, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.